Thank you both for sitting down with me. And first of all, congratulations. I know people will be viewing this after the race, but you've got collectively a pole and a sprint win.
Our second pole together, actually.
It's amazing. It's
there
amazing,
you go.
Actually.
How was it to see the car yet again with the Carlyle name on it?
It just, every time it's exciting. It's like a kid opening a gift, and there it is. There's your toy, except this is an extraordinary toy that they spend years building, and then they just keep winning and winning and winning.
It's a big toy, an expensive toy, and I have to say, it does have this element that it feels like a different Carlyle. Typically, a Carlyle that operates behind the scenes, working with institutional investors, but this is big, this is splashy, not to mention expensive. Why put yourself out there like this?
Well, if you think about the evolution of finance, the last 30 years, you've seen a remarkable development of private markets. Private markets are really the primary source of capital for many companies. As that capital continues to grow, the market has just evolved to a place where wealth, retail, the breadth of what we do globally is just evolved also. And this is just part of the natural evolution. While it might feel unique now, I think it's actually not revolutionary at all. It's really just quite evolutionary.
And why move that way with Red Bull specifically?
Well, that was pretty easy. Everything about Oracle Red Bull Racing is about performance, execution, excellence. So that part was very easy to see and very easy to relate to as a firm. The sport, F1, is also global and growing dramatically, as we know, as are private markets. And so that all aligned. What made this really special was when Laurent and I spent time together, the team spent time together, and there was almost like this sort of very, uniquely natural affinity where we all just became best friends really quickly. And so, hey, it's got to be fun too, but it is about performance excellence first and foremost.
I was going to say, Laurent, given what Harvey is saying, that the finance world in general has been more interested in sport, more interested in F1. Have you been fielding a lot of calls before this partnership from Harvey's peers who wanted to get in like he did?
You know, in reality, no. It felt very natural straight away with Carlyle, with Harvey. It's this moment where you realize that the person you are talking with are the best at what they do in the world, and we feel we are quite good at what we do, and what we see with our partners is that we go and try to partner with companies that are the best at what they do, and we had a lot more points of connections. We had these performance obsessions. We have this data-driven approach in our very different business. But together with that quest for perfection in everything we are doing, it felt like a very, very natural connection.
To be fair, Harvey, there have been some outspoken critics about the move for private capital to do sponsorships, to get invested in sports. Josh Easterly of Sixth Street said at a conference a couple weeks ago, it's representative to him that firms are more concentrated on fine-tuning their brand than on the returns themselves. What do you say to that criticism?
Our business is exactly the way Laurent just described it. It's first and foremost always about performance. Performance drives everything. If you have performance, you have success. Again, you think about everything they do at Oracle Red Bull Racing, it's all oriented around success. When he references data, we think about data. It's different data, but these are organizations driven around performance excellence. If you don't have performance, you don't have success. In terms of the partnership here, yeah, this is important to be able to reach a global audience. You mentioned sport before. There's a real desire in the world for people to come together around sport, and this is truly one of the fastest growing sports in the world. And so it's all very synergistic, but you don't have success without performance. You can't sacrifice it. It has to stay number one.
Well, the concentration of the sport, it's growing quickly. Apple, now a US partnership with F1. But again, there is so much institutional money coming in, whether it be Carlyle, a sponsorship, whether it be other private capital firms taking investments in the team itself. What has that money done to change this sport, Laurent?
I think as a sport, we have spent years and decades to try to have a more global reach. We have been trying to reach out to our fans. We have been trying to reach out to the businesses. And finally, it seems that we are now having that incredible growth year after year. We reach more fans, more global audience. We have now 40% of our global audience in Formula One that is female, 40% that is under 35 years old. And we also had that common points of connections with Carlyle and with Harvey. They are trying to get private markets to have that broader reach. And Formula One is also trying to get that broader reach towards a bigger fan base. And we are enjoying that period. We worked a lot to be closer to our fans, and you are right, there is so much more coming. We feel we are only at the beginning, especially in the US, in terms of reaching out to the wider audience.
It's a fair point. This growth is happening to both of your industries at the same time. Harvey, that growth also coincides with you taking over the leadership of Carlyle in early 2023. It does feel like a different mindset coming from people, institutions coming to you to buy funds versus you now having to sell them as well to a broader audience. Is this a big cultural shift you think that you're leading at Carlyle? Is this a Carlyle 2.0?
Well, I think, again, if you think about, it's an incredibly competitive world out there. All organizations have to go through constant processes of self-analytics, really being humble, asking themselves, hey, what can we do better tomorrow? What can we do better for any client we serve around the world, whether it's a wealthy individual outside the United States or a future retirement, an individual planning for retirement in the United States when all those rules change. And so, no, I don't know if you're ever through your 2.0s. I think as a leader of any organization, you constantly have to be working with your teams to say, hey, on any given day, what can we learn? What can we do better? And who can we serve better? And so again, I don't view that any of that as revolutionary. I just think of that as evolutionary. Now the firm, as you point out, has been on a strong growth trajectory since I've shown up. The team's really rallied. They've done an extraordinary job. I'm really quite proud of everything they've done.
Is it a cultural shift, though, to go from institutions to have to think about retail and wealth?
I wouldn't say it's a cultural shift because at the core of everything that is culturally relevant is performance. What I would say is understanding that end client. So you see a lot in the news today about retirement. It's not really even a sensible question to me whether retirees in the United States should have access to private markets. Firefighters, millions of them, teachers, millions of them have had access to these solutions through their pension plans. What is relevant is how do you structure them? How do you work with regulators to get it correct? So the real issue about extending private markets more broadly around the world to different clients is just getting it right. But it makes total sense. You know, and since 2000, we've lost half the public companies in the world. So private markets are the market that people want to allocate capital to, and they shouldn't be denied that opportunity. We just as an industry have to be really thoughtful about how we deliver it.
Right. Well, you coming in as leader, maybe there are some things that also mirror each other. Coming in when there's some tumult at the top, when there's maybe questions of leadership. Laurent, you've had to do that this year as well. Has Harvey given you any advice of what it's like to come in as leader when there are questions surrounding past leadership?
Of course it did. Of course, absolutely. And you know, it even goes beyond. You know, when we say why do we partner with Carlyle? We partner with companies so that we can have that challenge. We can have that exchange about leaderships, about culture.
Well, we have to know what the advice
people.
was. We need to see behind the scenes.
You know, the behind the scene advice was as simple as that. You know, it's all about performance, and performance only comes from people. So get your people in the right conditions to work, give them the possibility to express their talents, make sure they have the right working environment for them to operate at best. That's what they do. That's what we do. That was one of his first advice.
Yeah.
And all of that is happening in an incredibly technological environment and data-driven
to be
environment.
fair, you were also coming from Racing Bulls where you were having a lot of success with the team, even outperforming the parent team at certain points too. Was it a hard decision to make to come over to Red Bull, or was it even a choice at all?
I think it was an incredible honor, you know, to receive that call. The first feeling you get is it is Red Bull asking you to step up there. There is a sense of loyalty towards the company. So of course it was a big news and a big surprise. But it's also something that you have to jump into as part of the loyalty you have with the group. And you know it's an incredible honor and privilege to be part of a team that has been winning so much in such a competitive environment in the last 2 decades.
You know, as leaders, we can all learn from each other. You know, what he just talked about was really about talent, and talent drives everything. We're in a people business. No matter how much data we collect, no matter how much technology we implement, we're in a data business. he didn't want to get into too much detail. He has called me about tire selection, and I did call him for advice during the government shutdown. I said, hey, should we brainstorm about these issues? But anyway, that's really just between him and me as leaders.
So for the sprint, you were hard, soft, medium. You were there every call.
He doesn't call me live. We usually talk a couple days before a race, and then I'll talk to him like leading up to the government shutdown. But once it happens, I'm doing my thing. He's doing his
Well, maybe
thing.
you're the right person for this, Harvey, because I was really struck by something you said last week at a conference. You called yourself, as part of being the top of Carlyle, also the chief worry officer.
Sure.
What is your chief worry right now as the chief worry officer?
Well, the important thing about being the chief worry officer is there's no list of things that one doesn't worry about. But I think that, part of my role, and primarily really what drives my role, is exactly what Laurent just said about enabling the team, motivating the team, bringing the team together, ensuring that the team feels good about success, but not too good, always staying hungry, but at the same time humble. They've had really remarkable success since he stepped in. I mean, it is extraordinary with this man, leader, and friend, and the whole team and Max have achieved. Like, it's really needs to be underscored. I think in terms of worries, the key things about worrying is anticipating things that may happen, but allowing your teams to really digest that information. So at this particular point in time, as we sit here, there's a lot of people talking about markets being priced for perfection, or geopolitics, or basically the way governments are relating, and trends that have existed for 30, 40, 50 years that are somewhat reversing. I would put all these things sort of on my list of things I focus on, but there's nothing as I sit here this morning that I'm worried about, other than that we're going to win every race for the rest of the season, which also I will now say was part of our contractual agreement. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay, well, if something goes wrong and you don't win, we're going to check in on this. None at all. To that point, Max has been closing the gap. What needs to go right in order for that gap not only to be closed, but to be surpassed?
Look, we take it race by race. As much as the world would like us to talk about the World Championships, because yes, mathematically it has been reopened thanks to the string of success we have been having. The truth is we take it race by race. We even take it day by day, session by session. That's how we keep the right focus, the right intensity in every decisions we make. And that's, the rest will be the consequence of that level of intensity.
2026 must be on your mind, and especially the second seat, I think, is on a lot of people's mind. You take it day by day, but at what point do you think you'll have the information you need to make that decision for the second seat next year?
We are in a very comfortable situation. We have the contracts on our side for all of our drivers. They are great kids. We want to give them as much time as possible to show us what they want to show us. So of course we don't want to wait until the last race, because if somebody loses seat, we need to be fair with this person. But we think another couple of races will probably make a call.
And what are you focusing on in the priorities for making that decision?
It's super simple. It's the same than for everything in our business. It's performance only.
Performance only. Harvey, in thinking about where the world goes from here, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up the chief worry of the moment, and that is concern about credit conditions. You've made it very clear that some of the issues, be it First Brands, be it some of the regional banks more recently, if it is a cockroach, it's not termites that are destroying the foundation of the building. They might be a one-off. At what point do you start to get concerned that maybe it doesn't necessarily show that the whole thing's going to crumble, but it's a late cycle and there have been mistakes made that might pop up more frequently?
Well, I think a lot of the questions that are being asked make a lot of sense. Since the financial crisis, we've had, generally speaking, very stimulative policy in all respects. Quantitative easing, fiscal policy through the pandemic and beyond. And so it's unsurprising when you look back, of course surprising when we came out of the financial crisis, but unsurprising when you look back, the trajectory of markets that we've experienced. Anytime you're very late cycle like this, any news item could be disruptive to a market on any given day. I think that we haven't had really a recession-driven credit cycle in a very, very, very long time. And so people are right to be concerned when they see credit underperformance. Having said that, the bigger questions around systemic risk, or when you say, will things crumble? Just because we haven't had a credit cycle in a long time doesn't mean if we go through a credit cycle, which inevitably we will, that's a certainty that things will crumble. I think the market structure is such today that it's pretty resilient. And when we look at our data, across our portfolio companies, as we've talked about, Dani, there are 700,000 employees in our portfolio companies around the world. There are 2,400 at Carlyle driving all this activity. When we look at that data today, that data suggests that companies are growing, employment is steady, inflation's a little sticky, but there's nothing in the immediate horizon that suggests that, as you would say, things are crumbling. Having said that, late cycle, it should be on a worry list.
It should, okay, makes sense as chief worry officer. What specifically is the worry then, if it's not
Well,
a
I think
systemic
whenever
issue?
you get to a point where markets are, let's say, very stretched, credit spreads are very tight, it's about how you deploy marginal capital from our perspective. And so when we think about it, again, we're not in the business of avoiding risk. That's not the business we're in. We're in the risk-taking business. We have to be in the business of pricing it correctly. So anytime you're late cycle, you want to be very, very thoughtful about that marginal risk deployment. Last year, we deployed billions of capital, sometimes in Europe, sometimes in the US, sometimes in Asia, but you have to be looking around the world for the capital with the right risk return, and that's what we do on behalf of all of our clients.
Just to bring this back around, there have been some concerns that with the amount of money coming in from wealth, that gets harder to do. Just because there's that much more money that needs to be deployed, and maybe you go into things that you otherwise wouldn't have because that money needs to be put to work. Is that a fair concern?
Well, I think it's a fair concern if you're not thoughtful about deployment. In the history of cycles, what you tend to see is too much capital coming into a space chasing too little return. It's our responsibility to manage that capital thoughtfully. And so that's our obligation. That's how we think about it.
Is there a concern that others aren't doing that as this money's coming in?
I think at any time you go through a long cycle, you're going to see marginal participants who may not make the best judgments. But again, your point is whether or not really what you're getting is whether or not it's systemic or not. I don't see that right now.
Well, just before we let both of you go, the first big splashy sponsorship, more to come between you two, between Carlyle and other sports?
Right now, we're pretty thrilled with this partnership, and we just continue to root for our friend here and the whole team and Max, and so no, we're quite satisfied.
And you know, on our side, we are very proud that Carlyle is the first ever global investment firms to partners in Formula One. You know, it's the first time also for the sport to be connected with this part of the business, and we are very proud that they chose Oracle Red Bull Racing.
Yeah, we're thrilled with it.
Well, we're all excited to watch the race today with the Carlyle sign zipping by. Good luck and congratulations already for this weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you both so much.
Thanks, Dani.